Fall of the KASHNA, Volume 1, Agents of Shadows. It has been almost 1,000 eons since the end of the Hell War. Most don't know. Most don't count the passage of years. For some, they say it is uncounted eons since the end of the Hell War. Nel Sorrow remembers how long it has been. Nel Sorrow counts the years. The long Hell War changed him, transformed him. The end of the Hell War had done the same. What followed was a season of hope, but then had come his kidnapping, the change in Ravania, and the loss of his hope, his future. But not all of his hope was gone. After all this time, he still clings to hope, despite how meager, despite everything he's followed Ravania through, and he will follow her through more. The Remlon incident crushed much of his hope, scared him, made him go away for a time. Sometimes, being near her is harder than being away from her, but being away from her makes him colder, darker, more hopeless. Sometimes, when he is at his best as a shadow traveler, he is furthest from Ravania. From the Journals of the Humengi. Part 1, Man of Sorrows. She can keep more secrets from me than she believes. Or maybe she knows it. Another secret, I suppose. Nel Sorrow, speaking with his brother Mark about Ravania. Nel Sorrow stood in the round command deck of his shadow traveler ship, Shadow. He was at a control stump in the middle of the room. A broad oval window was in front of the stump, and behind it was an oval doorway that led out into a hallway. The stump was wood like the rest of the ship, and indeed looked like a strange, mushroom-like tree stump had grown up out of the polished wooden floor. There were glowing, colorful membranes across the top of the stump, and glowing above the stump, presently, was the image of a man. The man wore a frumpy dark suit, and his black hair was shaggy. He had on a blue bow tie, but it was askew. His eyes were exactly the same as Nell's. "Please see to the securing of Aaron Sadell, Thoroton," Nell said, looking up at the whisper image as Mandragora stepped up beside him. "You're not staying?" Thoroton asked, sounding startled. "I have other places to be." Thoroton frowned. "Do you?" he asked. "I do," Nell growled, and he waved a hand. The whisper image flickered away. There was a groaning, creaking sound around him, like wood straining under stresses. "Yes," Nell responded to Shadow's question. "Take us away." The ship groaned and creaked. "I don't care," Nell responded. "Pick a direction." He turned and started away from the control stump as Shadow launched herself into Hyperion space. It had been a long couple of days, and he was tired. He needed to lay down, have a rest. "Grandfather," Mandragora said with an exasperated edge as he started to walk away. Nell stopped and turned back to the girl. "What?" he asked. "You just lied to Thoroton." "Did I?" Nell asked. "If you recall, Mandragora, we quite by accident fell into this little ordeal. We helped where we could. Perhaps we will run into someone else who needs our help. You should have stayed and helped." "I'm not good at that sort of thing." "You absolutely are," Mandragora shot back. Nell shrugged and started to turn. He stopped when Mandragora folded her arms across her chest and narrowed her eyes at him, frowning deeply. "What?" Nell sighed. "I'm worried you would have done it," the girl said after a moment. "Done what?" "Killed him." "Salithapid?" "Yes." "I would have," Nell said blandly. "And what about the consequences?" Mandragora spat. "The Overdawn Council—" "Do I look like I give a frash about the Overdawn Council?" Nell barked, and Mandragora flinched at his outburst. Sighing, he hung his head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Silence hung between them for a moment. "Grandfather," Mandragora said after a time, "I'm worried about you. You've been too long away from—" "I know what you're going to say," Nell argued, looking up again, cutting Mandragora off. "But Ravania doesn't want to see me." Mandragora threw her head back and let out a frustrated groan. "You're so infuriating sometimes." "You weren't there during the Remlon incident," Nell pointed out. "You didn't see." He stopped himself, forcing the haunting memories from his mind. Mandragora stepped toward Nell and took his hand. "Grandfather," she said, looking him in the eyes. Nell didn't meet her gaze. "Grandfather," she said with more force. Nell sighed and looked straight at her. I know what happened at Remlon hurt you. I know it did damage to your hope, but... But what? Nell asked with a frown. This is never going to end, this thing, where she gets husbands. You know how bad the last one was. I've told you about the others before him. I saw her, Mandragora. I saw and heard Ravania talking with the Overdawn agent. She tries to tell me that one day it will all change, but she will keep bowing to them, keep listening to them. Grandfather! Nell held up a hand and a whisper image blossomed from it. The image was of Ravania, pure, beautiful, her hair so silky white, face forever young, brown eyes so fathomless and deep. Just like Genesis. She is Genesis, Nell thought to himself. With Ravania in the moving whisper images was Zark, a blue-skinned, bald alien man with yellow eyes. He wore a dark suit and looked grim. He spoke and said, Your help, as always, was timely, Ravania. But you are here with Nell, not Wrangle. Wrangle chooses rarely to grace my presence, Ravania said in the whisper image, frowning. There are problems? There have never been anything but problems. It is always this way with the husbands you choose for me. They don't love me, and I can never love them. There is reason for it, you... Ravania held up a hand, stopping Zark. Please, spare me the lecture. Silence fell between the two. If Wrangle should ever fall, Zark said after a moment tentatively, as the others have, or by other means. Ravania, are you still dedicated to your duty? You know I am. What about Nell? Ravania was silent for a moment, and then said, Nell can never be. Nell closed his hand and the whisper image vanished. You've shown me that, Mandragora retorted. And you refuse to see what I see. What do you see? The girl snapped. Nell stared at her for a moment. Then, with a quivering lip, he said, All hope is lost. All this, all I've suffered, believing there was some light at the end of this hellish tunnel, trusting her when she tells me, someday, after everything, from her own mouth I hear the truth. Nell can never be. Talk to her about it. I am too scared, Nell admitted. Why? I'm scared she will confirm it. Nell blinked quickly, his eyes stinging. He turned to start away again and said, Loss of hope hurts me the worst of all, Mandragora. You lose hope when you're not around her, Nell, the girl called after him, stopping him at the doorway of the command deck. Stop walking away from her. However hard it is for you, remember that it is hard for her too. Nell turned back to Mandragora. His jaw was clenched, and for a moment he couldn't speak. When he did, it came out in a growl. When I'm with her, I hope, and it makes me better. But sometimes, when I'm with her, I see how hopeless it really is. My hope is shattered and I fall apart. Without hope, I'm nothing. I become a shadow. I am a shadow. Lost in the dark. Together and apart. Sometimes, it's exactly the same. Hopeless, Mandragora asked sadly. Hopeless, Nell agreed. This time he walked away, moving through the wooden hallways of his living ship, feeling the anguish raw in his soul. The agony felt so fresh now since Mandragora tore that wound open again. He didn't blame her. He wasn't angry. He knew she did it out of a place of love. Love, hope, Nell thought bitterly to himself. They're for suckers. He reached his quarters and the doors slid aside for him. He felt his bones aching, everything in him. He felt his age as he crossed the living room of his home and stopped at an oval window to look out on the colors of Hyperion space, as he hurtled through them, going wherever, nowhere, somewhere. Nell can never be, he heard in his mind again. Ravania's words haunted him mercilessly. Shadow, pain, sorrow suffused him. Absently, his hand went to his pocket and he drew out his comm. He switched it on and the screen glowed brightly. An image of Ravania met his eyes, but he swiped past it and triggered his light setting. A flash of brilliance flickered before the shadow traveler's blue eyes, and he shuddered as a wave of artificial emotion rolled through him. The momentary high was pushed back quickly by Nell's self-loathing, his hopeless heart, and the shuddering weakness that followed. He leaned on his walking stick and made his way to the couch. He nearly collapsed onto it and stared out at Hyperion space, letting his calm slide from his hand as bitter tears leaked from his eyes. He closed his eyes, settling into the couch, letting sleep drag him down toward oblivion. He heard his calm chime and opened his eyes, watching a small, glowing, whisper-image version of Ravania blossom up out of the scream. He stared at her. "Are you real?" he asked. She smiled at him with such warmth and tenderness. Nell saw something else in her face, worry, fear. He sat up, scooped up his calm, and looked at Ravania seriously. "What is it?" he asked. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Something's happened," Nell said. Ravania winced and looked down sadly. "I can't keep much hidden from you, can I?" She looked up, and the expression of concern only deepened. "You've been away for a long time," she said after a moment, and the sad note in her voice cut him deeply. "I didn't mean to," he lied. "Liar," she countered, but smiled. Silence fell between them. "I wanted to call," Nell finally said, "but I didn't think you wanted me to." "Why?" Ravania asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Nell looked away. He was quiet for a long moment, but then said, without looking at Ravania, "I saw you talking with Zark. I heard what you said." Ravania didn't respond. Nell looked to her. Her eyes were glistening. "Nell can never be," Nell said. "There are things I have to say," Ravania whispered. "Things I don't want to." "Why say it at all?" Nell asked. "You always tell me someday." Ravania looked down. "It's the wish that my heart makes," she whimpered. Nell stared at her, his eyes stinging, his heart breaking. Mandragora's words came back to him. "This is hard for Ravania, too. Maybe more than it is for me," he thought, feeling like he'd added to her pain without realizing it. "I'm sorry," Nell said after a moment, his voice quivering. Ravania looked at him. "I always run away when I get scared." "It's natural," she assured him. They were quiet for a long moment. "You need something, don't you?" Nell finally asked. "I always call you when I need something," Ravania said sadly. "It shouldn't be so." "It is so. What do you need?" "I need you, Nell. Things with the Kroom are starting to get out of hand. Wrangel is little to no help. I need you, Nell. I need you with me again." He stared at her. Then he nodded. "I'm already on the way," he promised. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and there are more episodes on the way.